Hey there, fellow tamers and Digidestined. It's Mike, aka Sanaku from Overground, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the final episode of our BT4 Rainbow series, where today we're going to be going over the color black. So again, if you're unfamiliar with the Rainbow series, this is something we do every time a new set drops, in this case BT4, where we build one deck of every color out of the set based on what we pulled or based on what we had access to. It could be our favorite Digimon, our favorite strategies, our favorite archetypes, just something to get our feet wet, kind of get our foot in the door, build first drafts of everything for us. Different colors, just to kind of explore our options. And as the format goes on, we kind of refine these decks and make them a little bit better and a little bit more unique. Now, before we get into the deck list, I need to say that black is a very strange color in the Digimon TCG, and that's why I kind of saved it for last, because it's one of those colors that hasn't quite found its identity yet. When 1.0 came out, it was pretty much entirely just blocker focused. It was, this is the end game, you know, with it may be a dash of reboot, but it was more primarily blocker focused. And then 1.5 comes around, and then we have a heavier focus on the reboot mechanic. And now it kind of seems like black is meant to be played as an OTK deck. And originally when we were conceiving this deck, the main focus was supposed to be either Blastmon or the new Blackwork Greymon promo from the Dash Pack. But we felt that in the rest of the Rainbow series, we still had a couple other big OTK enabled decks, like the big combo you could pull off with Mirage Galgamon, or the big OTK swings that you could do with Shine Greymon in red. And I felt that I just didn't want to do another OTK deck. So I kind of really scratched my head and tried to see, well, what kind of black deck can I build? Do I build a blocker-centric deck? Do I build a reboot-centric deck? Because I didn't really want to focus on that big, you know, final Zubagon punch combo that you know, everyone's been talking up since the release of BT4. And I settled on Machinedramon. Now, Machinedramon is my favorite Dark Master from the original Digimon series, and it's still one of my favorite Digimon to this day. And as of the new Black starter deck being released, there was a new Machinedramon that came out. And so I really want to kind of try a whirl at building a deck around him specifically. Now, as we always say, these are first drafts. What I kind of had in theory may not necessarily translate well in practice. However, I am really proud of the result that we've been able to come together and kind of establish for now. And I'm really excited to test this out and see if my thoughts and kind of ideas of this deck come into fruition, or if I need to kind of scrap it, or if I'm just, you know, need some extra pushes or ways to tinker with the deck as well. So as always, at the end of the video, if you guys have any comments or questions or suggestions about the deck list as a whole, or if there's anything you would want to change, please feel free to let me know, and I will get back to you as soon as I can, because I'm always excited to hear your feedback. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about this Black Machinedramon list. So we're going to start out with the babies as always. We're playing 4 copies of Kaburimon. Kaburimon has pretty much just become the staple black baby. It's still never changed throughout the course of every single set release, and even the inclusion of the new starter deck being released. So it's kind of still there, just as long as we have a reboot, plus 1000. Bada boom, bada bing. That's all you need to do. And the big focus of this deck is really heavily rooted in the reboot keyword. We kind of want to give it as many Digimon as possible. You'll kind of see here that once again, we're on the Greymon and Metal Greymon train. This is just a combo that I feel is too good to pass up in black in general, especially since we have this is pretty much the only color that has access to the reboot keyword right now. So I feel that anytime I'm playing a deck that is focused on reboot, we need to make sure that we include this combo, because it's just too powerful to ignore. I've gone over it in several other videos that you've seen on the channel. We just went over it again in the Dhyeya video that came out a couple months ago, or maybe a couple weeks. I don't know. Time is relative in the pandemic. But either way, just go over it real quick before we go over the rest of the deck. You know, if you have reboot, you get jamming. If you have reboot, you get security attack +1. So at the end of the day, our main goal is to get to a big top end with reboot with a substantial amount of DP if we don't have jamming. But since we will have jamming with Greymon, the DP is irrelevant, and we can just start tearing through our opponent's security with security attack +1 and then unsuspend during the reboot, potentially having blockers on board, or even more, just having our opponent's inability to deal with them through regular combat. So our regular Digimon, we're going to go through the list. We got 4 copies of Toyagumon, which is the inheritable that provides reboot, which is another layer of redundancy to help us get to that level where we can trigger all these powerful effects. 4 copies of Commandramon. This is just a 2-cost rookie to get things into play a little bit cheaper to help accelerate our plays. 4 copies of the new Toyagumon that came in the new starter deck, and this is the inheritable where on our end of our opponent's turn, if they didn't declare an attack with a Digimon, we get to draw one. This is really powerful because since we are not necessarily entirely blocker focused, but we do play a few fair amount of blockers in the deck, there are situations where our opponent may not decide to declare an attack. And this is really good early game because especially if our opponent can't set up an ability to attack, this gives us actually just free consistency and free cycling to get deeper into our deck. Then we're playing 2 copies of Chumon just to shut down all those memory shenanigans from a couple different decks that you'd see in the format. Moving on to the champions, we're playing 4 copies of the new Dark Tyrannomon from the starter deck. This is a 1-cost blocker. We're playing 3 copies of Tankmon, which is another 1-cost evolution, 3 copies of the Jamming Greymon, as we discussed, and 2 copies of Sealsdramon, which is one of the new D-Brigade Digimon introduced in BT4 as well. And that's another archetype that I almost kind of talked about in terms of a black deck in general, but our friend Dhyeya was super hyped on the deck, and I didn't really want to steal his thunder, so look forward to a D-Brigade list from him very soon. I'll leave a link to his channel as well if I don't forget at the time of recording this video. Next, we're moving on to our ultimate lineup. We've got 3 copies of Metal Greymon. Again, he has Reboot himself, and he gives, again, Security Tech +1, and when someone evolves over top of him. 3 copies of Andromon to give us an additional blocker, so now between blockers we have Dark Tyranno, Sealsdramon, and Andromon so far. And 3 copies of Gogmamon, which is a new card introduced in BT4. He has another one of those cool little Digiburst abilities where we can send 2 materials attached to him to give one of our Digimon plus 2,000 till the end of our opponent's turn. So what that allows us to do is kind of buff up our blockers to be potentially bigger than our opponent's Digimon going into their next turn. And furthermore, this is really powerful because it helps us outplay something like Shine Greymon, or not Shine Greymon now, actually War Greymon. Well, Shine can still be around, but either way, giving the additional 2,000 buff means that our opponent needs to work a little bit harder to out our Digimon, or have to have stronger inheritables or something like that to make sure they can get additional DP reduction. And furthermore, his inheritable means that during all turns, both players' turns, the Digimon that evolves over top of it gets plus 1,000, which is also very beneficial for any blocker we have on our top end. So speaking of our top end, here's Machinedramon himself. This is the big boy that we kind of built the deck around, and his effect reads, when Digivolving, we can give up to 2 of our Digimon Reboot if they didn't already have it. If they have Reboot, they get double Reboot. And and this all happens until the end of our opponent's next turn. So what this allows us to do is that no matter what stack we have that is sitting on top of either the Greymon or the Metal Greymon, as soon as we go into Machinedramon, those inheritables become live if they didn't already have Reboot or if they didn't already have access to Toy Agumon in their source. So Machinedramon kind of brings the entire Reboot engine and combo together, because it allows us to grant Reboot where Reboot otherwise wouldn't have been provided, and turns on all of these super powerful effects immediately until the end of our opponent's next turn. So you can build up into a stack separately with either Greymon or Metal Greymon, not have it have Reboot, and just kind of have it sit there chilling out because it's a blocker and your opponent might not want to deal with it. Then down comes Machinedramon on a separate stack. Suddenly that Digimon has now become super powerful. You can swing with it, get those free checks, and then unsuspend it immediately to return it back to a blocker state on your opponent's turn. Machinedramon can also target itself to give itself Reboot, so you can swing for a quick 11, get an extra 30 check if necessary if you've got that combo, but if not, it's just a free quick big 11,000 check, 12,000 with Gogmamon rather, and any more with Capurimon because you're giving it Reboot. So Machinedramon also allows our Capurimons to always be live, because it means that no matter what Digimon that we grant the ability to, as long as they have a Capurimon underneath, and no matter barring any other outside sources, they will always make sure to become rebooters themselves so they can get that free 1,000 DP buff. Then to round out our mega lineup, we're playing 3 copies of Craniumon. This is probably one of the best megas in black as well, because it's a 4-cost blocker and it allows all of your blockers to not be destroyed by card effects. Now, unfortunately, we're in a very heavy DP reduction format, and that kind of gets around Craniumon, so he's not as powerful as he used to be, but he's worth still including in the deck because he cannot be destroyed through things like just regular Omnimon. He can't be destroyed by Gaia Force. He can't be destroyed by any just straight destruction removal card that might be in the game. And I know we have a lot of other kind of cards that counteract that, like Cockadus Breath or, Nidhogg that can put to the bottom of the deck or anything like that. But it's still worth playing because he's a big body at 12,000. And if we include something like Gogmamon, he can make him 13,000, which means that we can stop a lot of our opponent's big heavy hitters from running into our security, because they generally cap out at about 11,000, barring any DP reductions on their attack declaration as well. And then we've got 3 level 7s in the deck. We're playing 1 copy of Alteraz just to help us keep board control, and again 2 copies of Chaosmon, similar to what we were playing in the green deck, because since we have big black level 6s, Chaosmon can come down to take out one of our opponent's Digimon through battle, even if they're unsuspended, and then we can get that free piercing check. And what's really cool with Machinedramon is that if we evolve into Machinedramon, give him Reboot, we can then evolve into Chaosmon afterwards. Chaosmon will retain that reboot that Machinedramon gave himself, and then he can swing into an unsuspended Digimon. If he's got a Metal Greymon underneath, that means he'll actually do 2 checks with piercing, which is very powerful. Then we're playing 3 copies of the new Izzy from BT4. So this Izzy sets us to 3, similar to the old Black Tie. The difference with him is that we look at the top 3 cards of our deck, and if it's all black cards, we actually gain 1 memory. So it actually comes in for 3 instead of 4. But the best part about Izzy is that it lets us rearrange the top cards that we find. So it allows us to add extra layers of consistency because we're in control of what we're about to draw. And when we combine that with stuff like the Toy Agumon, for example, it helps us filter our decks in a very specific order by finding the pieces that we need in every given circumstance. And finally, we're playing 2 copies of Breath of the Gods. This is mostly here for the security check, because when it gets checked, it stops our opponent from being able to attack the player for the remainder of the turn. But if we do have it in our hand, we can give one of our Digimon Reboot, which again is the entire purpose of the deck, so we can unlock these very powerful effects. And again, with anything like Craniumon, for example, or if it's turn after Machinedramon's used its effect and it's used up, we can put Reboot on something and then evolve into Chaosmon to give that additional free check, and then unsuspend the Chaosmon as well on the opponent's next turn. But this has been the first draft of the Black Machinedramon deck for the final episode of the Rainbow series. This is one of the few decks in the entire series that has probably received the least amount of testing, so I'm still not 100% sure how comfortable I am with the deck as a whole. However, again, just based on how the direction Black was kind of taken in BT4, I kind of want to be a little bit unique with my first Black deck of the format, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Again, if you guys have any comments or suggestions, please let me know. If there's anything you would do to this deck to make it a little bit different or change it to make it a little bit more consistent, feel free to comment and I will get back to you guys as soon as possible. If you like what we do here at the Overground, please consider subscribing to help us reach our next subscriber milestone. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up as well, so we know that you like this Rainbow series and that we can continue making it for you. Look forward to the Rainbow Rumble coming soon, where we're going to be pitting all of the decks from the Rainbow series against one another to see who is the ultimate victor. And we'll get to see this deck in action as is, and we'll be able to see how strong it actually is based on the theory that I've crafted today. But thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see y'all in the next one.